We're talking actors and directors who put on the shows.
We're talking playwrights and designers who you'll want to know.
From the very first rehearsal to the final curtain call.
We might be off Broadway, but we're talking about it all.
'Cause we're two local gals
With global pals, it's everything, everything, everything theater.
with Benita
And Ellen. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Everything Theater Podcast, the podcast where we talk about...
Everything theater. Hi there, I'm Benita Zahn.
And I'm Ellen Cribbs. And before we get going today with our fabulous guest, we want to mention that we are sponsored by Harbinger Theater. Harbinger Theater in collaboration with Albany Civic Theater. They are bringing the show Maggie May. It is running now until September 22nd. It's a beautiful show about a family dealing with Alzheimer's. This is the first collaboration, co-production between Albany Civic and Harbinger, and it is a U.S. premiere. It's never been done in the entire United States. It's a big deal. And let's see some of the fun things. I think you've missed some of the you missed the I Love the 70s night. That was last week. But there is a talk back coming back this weekend on the 15th. And as I said, it runs to the 22nd. You can get your tickets at Albany Civic Theater.
And some great local performers are in it.
Mm-hmm.
So get that. Unfortunately, I can't get to see it because I'm over at the Majestic Theater through October 20th, performing in Sheer Madness with Beth Pietrangelo, who many of you know. She's done a lot of work locally, and Jeff Hafner, who you don't know, but he was in our production of Sheer Madness last summer at the Lake George Dinner Theater. Also, Michael DeVito, who performed locally, and now he is over in West Springfield performing. He's also in the show. So some familiar faces make the drive over. There's a nice couple of nice places to get a bite. But we're going to talk backstage right now. We have Elizabeth Streeter with us, and if memory serves, weren't we all involved in the production together?
We were, yeah. When what was it, Shakespeare in Love? When
That's
all three of
right.
us were working together at Cap
I was
Rep.
gonna say, Liz, were you in the dressing room when the famous conversation happened between me and Benita of like, we should do a podcast?
I think I was probably in the background helping Jenny Strasberg, who was our lead lady for that show, helping her get dressed and ready for the top of the show. I'm sure I was there in the background doing something. That was
We did a
definitely
lot of hat pinning too.
Oh, so many pins, so many wigs. Definitely.
But that was where the podcast came to be.
I remember.
If you
Yeah.
don't know, in the old Capital Rep, you sat in the line in the makeup room. I mean, we really were shoulder to shoulder.
That show was, people were stuffed in for that show. We were at capacity for both of our dressing rooms for sure.
Yeah. And that's how, and Ellen and I were sitting next to each other. And
Yeah, right in the middle.
talking about this. Yeah. And I just a quick aside. You mentioned Jenny Strasberg, who played Juliet.
Yes.
And wonderful, wonderful. I've got to give her kudos. Just a great human being and wonderful on stage. But in the small world of theater, when I auditioned for Sheer Madness the first time last year, and it was being directed by one of the writers of the show, Bruce.
Oh, wow.
And Bruce was looking to cast me, and he reached out to Jenny and said, I'm looking to cast Benita. Tell me.
What a lovely human.
And she gave the A-OK. So let me tell whoever's listening, if you've got a problem with a castmate, take it home. You don't know this is, and I adore Jen.
Yeah.
It was a great, nobody was making, I wasn't saying that I'm making anything up here. We all got along great.
Yeah.
But be real clear. The people you work with, from the wonderful person like Liz who pins your hat and wig and all that.
That show.
You never know.
Yeah, I know even like in auditions when people are rude to the monitor, like the monitor goes in and says, that person was a jerk. And the directors go, okay, don't want to work with them.
And it's funny, I think, talking about like backstage and tech, we talk about regularly in every job I've had in the theater about how small of a world it is and how, people talk, even if even like good things and bad things, people talk, and you don't want to like it's tough because I feel like sometimes backstage emotions get high, especially during like techs. So people are gonna say things, but you can't take it with you gotta just let things roll. And like just remember that everybody's having a high octane moment backstage sometimes, and everybody's just gotta roll with it. And I know that sounds very hippy dippy, but I used to tell people as like some actors where it's like they'd blow up and get mad at me for something or whatever. And I would always joke and say, I'm like, you get one pass. You get one free pass during tech, but then after that, you don't get to treat me any differently. But like, I don't know. I feel Shakespeare in Love was such a lovely experience. I'm sorry. I love talking about it. Was top 3 shows in terms of like cast for me, just because you guys loved each other. Like it was so cohesive, so loving. Everybody was just so in it for lack of better term. And
The one who played the queen, you know, Lori?
oh, love Lori. Love her so much.
Got to see her. She was in town
Oh,
a short while ago, and she and her husband were in, and we all got together with my husband to have dinner. You know, it is. So it is community. And
mhm.
we want to talk to you, Liz, about that backstage
Okay. What?
aspect. I mean, everybody sees our faces, but goodness gracious, it would never happen without you folks running the show.
It's wild. And over the summer I work, for those who don't know, I'm the associate production manager at Proctors Theater out in Schenectady. And I had the pleasure of working with the Broadway camp each summer. And I had the opportunity to speak to the technical theater students at that about careers in the theater. And just reminding them that like, hey, I know when you're in high school, you have that playful rivalry of like backstage versus on stage. You can't have that in real life. Like it doesn't work. We are all in this together. So if you walk in there being like, oh, we can we can act without the tech. I'm like, nah, you can. It's not going to be as good without them. You're not going to have costumes, lights, sound, or a set to play on, but you can act. But most people don't want to sit there and watch you yell a monologue into a black space. Or I should say a dark space, excuse me.
Give us a little sense of your journey to where you are now.
It was winding, that's for sure. I started out, I didn't start doing theater till high school. I come from a background of my parents are scientists, and there's no one in my family who has done the arts. It was always scientists and teachers. So I've blazed a new trail in our family that no one knew existed. But in high school, when I started doing theater, I realized that everything I love kind of all fits together because I love building and painting and reading, and it all fell in place. So I went to school for theater design and technology out at Keene State College in Keene, New Hampshire. Initially interested in doing scenic design, but while there, I did everything. I was ASM, stage manager, scenic carpenter, scenic painter, assistant technical director, assistant lighting designer, or not designer, excuse me, assistant master electrician. Was running light board, soundboard, backstage for all of the shows. I managed to squeak by because you had to have a performance credit there. And they said if you were a stage manager, that counted as a performance credit. So I never actually had to perform on stage in front of anybody, which was fantastic for me. But
you own more black clothing.
even today, half of my closet is black clothing. I have not been able to like purge that out of my soul. I wear black every other day.
But come on, Liz, did you have keys hanging from your belt?
I had a carabiner that you could hear from a mile away. It truly, I spent more time in and around my college theater than I did any other classroom or any other building on campus. And was able to, because it was such a small school, I was able to do design work there on top of being one of the leaders in my department as I got into the upperclassmen years. From there, I got hired back after I graduated to do 2 shows at my college, once as a costume designer and once as a scenic painter. And after that was the first time I got hired at Cap Rep for Secret Garden back in December of 2014, I think. Yeah, it was the Christmas show of 2014, right after I graduated from college. and I was the wardrobe assistant there for that show. So that was my first, I look at it as my first big professional gig outside of internships where I was actually being paid and not just an intern. Because I joke, I've done 5 internships in the span of my career, and I don't recommend it. Or rather, I recommend internships. I don't recommend doing 5 of them. It's not worth it. Truly, truly not. But from there, after graduating, I became much more of a costume focused person and scenic painting. Those were the two things I've done professionally more than anything else, which are always get me weird looks because they're so opposite from each other in people's minds.
So how do you tell them that they're not so opposite?
In my mind, for me, it's all creative, and that's what I like doing. And like understand that wardrobe is less creative than scenic painting on some face, but I also had this very practical nature when I got out of college, where I had a lot of friends who obviously went through the same program as me and never held a job in the theater professionally. And which happens to everybody. It happens to everybody in every denomination, any field, it can happen.
Mhm.
But I had this really dogged determination where I'm like, I don't care what it is. I don't care what they have me do. I'm gonna work in the theater. Like I'm gonna whatever job I can get, which is how I fell into the the wardrobe assistant gig, which then a year and a half later fell into the wardrobe supervisor gig at Cap Rep because I had gone down to the city to do an internship with the Juilliard School for a year. And upon completing that, I did a summer stock and I reached out to the production manager at Cap Rep and was like, hey, I'm moving back to the area. If you have any shows coming up, I'd love to help. Love to be a wardrobe assistant again. And he was like, absolutely, we'll hire you. He sends me a contract and I'm reading the contract and I'm like, wait a minute. That says supervisor, not assistant. What's that about? And they're like, don't worry about it. I was like, gonna just a little bit. But they both the production manager and the artistic director were both very much like, no, we trust you, we think you can do this, we think you can handle it. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I have no idea, we're gonna run with this, I guess. And the rest of that was history. I was there for 3.5 years.
I say
Wow.
we'll kind of talk about all the hats you've worn, but starting with wardrobe, that's how I met
Mhm.
you. You were my amazing wardrobe person for Miss Bennett, Christmas at
Yep.
Pemberley,
another
and
another one of my top 3 or like top shows there, like truly
so
such
good.
such like that Christmas at Pemberley, um Shakespeare in Love, and then when we did She Loves Me, those 3 shows stick in my mind as like the cast that like truly clicked and nobody had any issues. Everybody was lovey-dovey. It was just great. But yeah, that I loved Christmas at Pemberley. I thought that was a wonderful show.
Yeah, and it probably
Mostly
wasn't part of your job description, but like Liz would do my hair in pin curls because I had a wig. It was the first show I'd ever been wigged for, and I didn't know how to do pin curls. And I tell you,
you and
last year I did pin curls on myself, and they were awful. They were not anywhere near Liz Streeter quality.
we had such bonding time because you had almost the entirety of the first act happen before you entered stage.
Yep.
So everyone else, we'd be rushing to get everyone else ready. Everybody else would leave for places, and then you and I are just having our calm little 20-minute wig session. Just hanging out in the dressing room, being like, we got plenty of time. With the exception of the one time one of the guys ripped their pants all the way from all the inner thigh had just bust right before the top of the show. And I'm just like, of course it did.
So
Like, what a time.
talk us through some of the responsibilities of the wardrobe supervisor. What are you in charge of? What's your day to day?
So just to like put the disclaimer out there now, everything I say is purely from my experience. I know it's going to be different for everybody. You could talk to a million different wardrobe supervisors and they're all going to have different responsibilities and daily tasks based on union, non-union, small theater, large
And
theater.
let me jump in.
Mhm.
Union now, Liz?
I am not. I
Not.
am in my role. I am a management position, so I am not. I can join the union. I just can't do any work at Proctors because I am a management role there. So this weird way. It's a fun time of when I can and cannot help with anything backstage. Because if it is a union show and I am a manager, I technically am not allowed to, per our contract with the union, again, disclaimer, it can be different other places, but per our union as a manager, I can't help if there's more than 10 union people on the call.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, and I'm fine with that. Like I'm still involved. I'm still backstage. I still get to see everything. So I'm like, this is fine. Very different from what I was doing as a wardrobe supervisor, but still very interesting and very engaging work. When I was a wardrobe supervisor, I kind of took on multiple different hats in that my particular spot at Cap Rep, prior to me, wardrobe supervisor had been kind of to my understanding, was kind of a gig by gig where they weren't full-time employees of the theater. And there were 3 to 4 people in the costume shop, and then the wardrobe supervisor came in for the shows. When I came on, I kind of elbowed my way into being a full-time position because we had lost the 4th person in the shop. So I was like, well, I can be here to help with with stock, with like our costume stock and organizing and maintaining that. And I'm really good at craft. So I became a craft person in like painting the shoes or building head dresses and stuff like that. So I truly just like elbowed my way into having that be a full-time position because I was like, I can be useful when we're not in shows. But when we were in shows, my job became way more paperwork and detail oriented than I think I even expected at the time. Because prior to shows coming in, obviously we had the designers come in and I would sit down with them and plot every individual costume of every individual character in the show. So that we know like, oh, so for Ellen, Act 1 of Christmas at Pemberley, she had her gold dress and her little shawl and whatever. And then in Act 2, or whoever played Elizabeth, she had her blue dress in Act 1 and her maroon dress in Act 2, and here's the shoes she wears and the purse she carries, and this is like the headband she wears. And I would track that for every single character in every single show for every single scene. Make that all ahead of time and have that printed out for if I had an assistant or not. Because at Cap Rep, on the larger shows, I would usually have at least one. If it was a big show like Full Monty, I had 2. But if it was a small show, it's usually just me by myself. So it was more for my mental capacity. And that would all be done ahead of time before we got into tech. And then once we were in tech for a show, it would be like updating it every single day until we opened. A typical day once we were not in tech, because that's a whole separate, I know you guys have been through enough techs to know that that's a full marathon day of things.
Yeah.
And I would always remind, not on every show, but every once in a while you'd get someone being like, oh, it's too early, I don't want to be here. And me reminding people, I'm like, hey, just so you know, the technicians have been here at least an hour, if not 2 hours before you. And we'll be here 1, if not 2 hours after you. So there are very few times that I like got in people's business about that. But every once in a while, it would be, if I didn't have the caffeine in my system yet, it would come out every once in a while. But for me, when we were in show, I would come in early to get all the laundry out, separate all the laundry, fold all the laundry, iron and press all of the garments, divvy them out to their respective stations and try to get that all done. I liked having it all done before actors showed up as much as I could. Wasn't always possible depending on the size of the show, but try to get everything prepped and ironed and steamed so that when the actors start showing up, all I have to do is preset on stage wherever the costumes had to go for the quick changes that were coming up in the show. And then once all that's done, then it's me being on standby in case there's a costume rip or someone needs help with a wig or they can't find their socks. That was always my favorite one. People being like, I don't know where my socks are. I'm like, are they exactly where they live, where I put them every single day? Just a thought. It truly, my most common thing is someone being like, I can't find my socks or my undershirt or whatever. And then from there, it's the running of the show. After the show ends, you would collect all of the costumes that were left on stage, collect all the laundry, bring it downstairs, start laundry, vodka spray, everything that couldn't be washed, which everyone is always like, why vodka? I'm like, well, because it kills the bacteria. So, and you buy the lowest shelf stuff with the highest concentration and just half that, half water, spray it, good to go. At least, again.
Just had that conversation over at the Majestic Theater
Oh,
because
yeah.
some things don't wash real well. And I went, oh, well, that's going to be vodka, and
Yeah.
they go, why does that work? Well, there's the answer. It kills the
Yeah.
bacteria. So no
And
stink.
it's supposed to just hold it over to when you can get it dry cleaned. And we had that at once every Sunday. That was part of my post show, is I would go through, bag up everything. I always felt awful because I bag it up in garbage bags, put it out for dry cleaning to pick up on Monday and then deliver back Tuesday morning. And I would always come in early on Tuesday to make sure everything had been delivered back, because that happened a couple times where something wouldn't come back. There was one, it was during She Loves Me, actually, where one of the dresses did not come back. And I probably spent a solid hour on the phone with our dry cleaner being like, hey, I need this. And they're like, oh, we can get it back to you first thing in the morning. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I need this in 3 hours. Like, it has to be here. Someone has to bring it to me. There is no ways around this. Please help me. Help me, help you, help me. But, and then, we do all that. The show comes down, laundry is going. And then once it comes out of the washer, hang up everything that can't go in the dryer, throw everything else in the dryer, and then I'm out for the night. It was always usually the first one in the building and the last one out when we were in show. So it was marathon. I miss it some days. I definitely like my current job, but there are definitely days where I miss that level of involvement. So that was my general day.
What would you say makes a successful quick change? Those are always the tricky things, right?
Communication. I think 100% it is communication. Because you can have all the tricks in the book, but if you are not communicating with your actor, the simplest thing can derail the whole change. And I know you and I, Ellen, multiple times, I always like to try to sit down with every actor that I had a quick change with and be like, how do you want this set up? Where are you coming from? Where it's the best way to do this? How do you want me to hand things to you? Because there's sometimes where I've always been the sort of person, anytime I go into a new position or a new role, I'm like, tell me how you want to do it and we can make it work. Tell me what works best for you and we will figure it out. There are a few times where I'm like, okay, I think my way is better, but most of the time I'm like, we'll find the middle ground, because my goal was always to make sure everyone was comfortable and felt safe and secure. That was, for me, that is always my primary goal for every show that I worked. If you hear noises, that's my cat mad that I'm not getting up to open the door. So just gonna put that out there. She's being crazy right now in the other corner of the room.
It's funny, about changing. I think about a very quick change years ago at Playhouse Stage Company. And basically it was, here I am, strip me, dress me, slap me, and send me back out.
True. If you have enough people to do that, I love that for you. I have never had that experience.
There was two. I just had two people. That was it. And I think that we were throwing cornstarch at each other because we were so damp.
I know there were so many times where I'd sit there and be like, this would be so much faster if I had another, there were a number of times where I would like pull a stage manager or an ASM being like, you're helping me right now. I'm sorry, I can't do this by myself. What was it? Oh, I cannot remember the name of the show, and it's gonna drive me crazy because it was one of the new act plays years ago. It was a 4-person cast, 3 men, 1 woman, and it was about this gentleman who was trying to help his father get back into the dating world, or get back into the dating scene. Well, he was actively also trying to be in the dating scene. It'll come. We're gonna finish talking. It'll come to me immediately, the name of this play. But there was one scene where the main character is a gay man, and he's in a gay club, and you have the other character playing his love interest go through 5 different costumes while walking around the front of that apron stage. and it was all underdressed. So he would, take off a jacket, take off a hat, take off the shirt. And then he came off stage and I had to rip his shirt off him. He had like a mesh long sleeve underneath and rip that off, put another vest on, put a hat on him. And it had to be done in like 3 seconds. And it truly was me pulling the ASM being like, I literally can't do this without you. You have to help. I don't care. Come here. Be part of this with me. Suffer with me.
That's when you need the vodka spray for yourself.
Oh my, I think the only other time I have been more stressed doing a change was during Full Monty. And we had, I apologize, I'm terrible with names for characters. I remember exactly which actor I was working with, but I don't remember the character name because a show ends and I'm already working on the next one, so it all leaves my brain. And he came off stage and it was right before the final scene where they all go on to do the final strip. And the ASM and I had to get his microphone off of him. And I had to reach my hand up and fish it down his back so he didn't ruin the cord of the microphone. And again, we had to do this while he was changing. So I'm just full hand up his back, trying to carefully remove this in the 5 seconds we have to do this change. And the first time we successfully completed it, both the ASM and I looked at each other and collapsed on the ground. We're like, oh, thank God. We turn around, there's an actor being like, are you guys okay? And then suddenly we're like, oh yeah, no, we're still working. Like, get up, run, scatter in directions to do the next half of our jobs. But oh God, what a time. It's always those short moments.
Behind you now, Liz.
Hmm?
Leaving that behind you now.
Mm-hmm.
You have a whole different set of challenges.
Yes. Production management is definitely a different beast than running shows. I explain to people now that for my boss and I, our work in an ideal perfect world, our work is done when the show arrives. And then once the show is there, we are there to mitigate problems. And in a perfect world, there are no problems to mitigate. That doesn't happen. That's never happened once in any of the shows I've worked at Proctors, where it's been purely perfect from top to bottom. But in what we do for production management for a touring house, we are effectively the liaison between the house, the venue itself, and the tours that are brought into the space. So we are the technical contacts of like, what tech do you travel with? What tech do you need us to rent? What instruments do you travel with? What instruments do you need us to rent? How many people do you need us to supply you with to run the show? When are you expected to be here? What time are you leaving? Do you need food? Do you need towels? Do you need housing? Like, we're the people who facilitate all of that being set up before they arrive. And then once they're here, by the time they leave, we have to complete the labor bill for obviously all of the people who work the show, as well as make sure the show gets paid. Because sometimes, not so much for Broadway tax, but for like one night events, it's usually us having to remember like, oh, we have to go grab that check from accounting to hand off to them before they leave, because otherwise it's going in the mail and they won't get it anytime soon, especially if they're touring all over the country. But it is very much, we try to get as much done ahead of time and then just be on standby for an emergency when an emergency pops up, which I don't know. I think I'm the bad penny of the two of us because I always have the weirdest things happen when I am on site. Like, we had a pipe burst while I was on site, not in the theater, in the Parker Inn. This was like 2 winters ago. And I think it was when Book of Mormon was there. Yeah, it was a Book of Mormon weekend. And someone came up to me and they're like, hey, there's a bunch of fire trucks outside. And I was like, oh, cool. Let me go see what that's about. Run, find our house manager, come to find out that there was a water pipe burst in the Parker Inn. And someone said to someone that they thought they smelled gas. So we had firefighters everywhere. The Parker Inn is just sopping wet, freezing because it's the middle of like December. And I'm running everywhere. I've got my little my radio to keep in touch with like everybody in the front, but I'm running to find everyone in the show to keep them appraised of what's going on. And be like, hey, so we don't have to leave yet, but you can't leave backstage because until we get cleared from the fire department, we don't know what's going to happen next. So just we're cleared to stay here, but don't go anywhere else.
And I should point out the Parker Inn is adjacent to Proctor's for those who don't know the neck of the woods.
Yeah, it is. We share a wall with them. And when you go to one of our other venues, Key Hall, you actually walk past the entrance to the Parker Inn. So it's truly kind of sandwiched between those two venue spaces. And was constantly under construction. And for whatever reason, the heating was off. And it caused this whole thing to happen on like a Saturday evening. We're just like, this is... I always sit there, I look at my boss, I'm like, why does the weird stuff happen for me? You get the fun morning shift and deal with all the packages. I deal with the weird incidents. But
so what's next? What do you do from here? Yeah. You know, as somebody is listening to you and your progression and thinking, gee, this is sort of the life I'd like to follow, then what happens?
In a realistic world, I don't have a 5-year plan right now because as I will say to anyone who asks, I am really content with where I'm at right now. I like my job. I like the people I work with. I am happy where I am. The next step when it comes would be to become a production manager because I am the associate production manager. So the next step would be the official production manager. I personally don't feel that I'm ready for that yet, but that's just a me thing. And I'm lucky in that though we are a department of 2, my boss and I work very well together and I think complement each other a lot backstage and are a good team. So I don't feel any need to sabotage him in any way, shape, or form to get his job. I don't want it yet. He can have it. It's fine. But logical next step would be production manager. And then from there, in the far, far future, maybe an operations manager sort of role, which is more entire venue as opposed to just one air or just backstage. It's someone who's looking at the entire building. And we have a wonderful operations manager. I have no issues with anybody. This is not me going on record saying I'm going to take their jobs. I don't want it.
No. I'm asking just sort of what's the progression for someone like you? You know, once you put the bobby pins down.
Right.
You know,
because
yeah.
I feel like for a long time, for me personally, I felt like there was a point where, especially as wardrobe supervisor, I'm like, I can't go up from here. And minimally not within that organization, because after a point, there comes a cap where you're like, okay, I've reached the top of this track. Once you become like the wardrobe supervisor or the head audio or the head carpenter or whatever, unless you move to design, like that's where you are, unless you go into production management, which is a major brain shift because it's not an active running the show job. It is the only desk job I have ever had in my life. And it was a wild first year trying to get that in my brain. Just being like, okay, so I have to sit here at my desk and I don't know what I'm doing. Like truly just being like, I guess I'll answer some emails.
But you also get to meet some fabulous people who come to Proctor's, yeah?
Yes, we have had some really, really lovely, lovely humans come through. I hate name dropping, but I do have like there are some lovely, lovely people who have come through. I'm gonna Carrie Elway from Princess Bride he was so sweet, so kind, very smitten with the theater. He thought the Proctors was a lovely space. John Cleese came through. He was a phenomenally lovely human being as well. I think one of my favorites is we had a drag queen come through, Sasha Velour. What a show, first of all. Amazingly artistic and beautiful show. And they were just lovely. Every member of their tour was lovely to work with, so professional, so kind. I feel, and I say this even when I was not a production manager, when I was working at the Rep and doing, regional gigs around the Northeast, I don't think I have ever had a person that I have worked with that I looked at and said, I hope I never work with you again. I've never had that experience. I've maybe had one or two actors who have had diva moments, but like, again, it's in a tech when people are stressed. And I'm like, you know what? I'll give you a pass. Like, you get to be a diva right now. Just don't throw me under the bus again. So I think I feel that I have been very lucky to have not had anyone like taint the experience for me.
I think it's your energy coming back to you, Liz.
I hope so. I once had, what was it? I think it was during She Loves Me, where someone made the comment to me during tech. They're like, you're such a calm, collected presence. I hope you know how you affect everybody around here, because we're all like, you help keep us calm and know that things are going to be handled. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, that's good to know, because I am freaking out right now. I'm like, I am stressed. I have not slept in 4 days.
I hope you had none of that here. We've got barely 60
No.
seconds left. What a treat. What a treat to see you, spend time with you.
I love seeing you guys every time I get the chance.
And our listeners, thank you so much. Make sure you go check out Maggie May. You have until September 22nd to get that great show. It's a Harbinger and Albany Civic Theater collaboration. And see Benita in Sheer Madness.
And Liz, always a pleasure. Be well.
It's lovely to see you guys.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. I'm Ellen Cribbs.
I'm Benita Zahn. Take care. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Everything Theater podcast. Special thanks goes out to Alice Grinling for our photography and Justin Friello for composing our amazing theme song. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you want to share your thoughts or what's going on in your theater community, you can reach out to us on social media or through our email at everythingtheaterpodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, it's everything, everything, everything.